Do not scroll past this moment because what you are about to uncover is not just another rumor or passing headline. It is the exact turning point where everything people thought they knew about Liu Wu and Zhao Lusi begins to fall apart. And if you stay with this until the very end, you will see how a series of overlooked details slowly came together to reveal something far deeper, something that no one expected to surface this clearly, this suddenly, and this powerfully. At first it was nothing. Just moments. Small ones. Easy to ignore. A glance that lasted slightly longer than it should. A shared silence that felt too comfortable to be accidental. Interactions that seemed ordinary on the surface, but carried a subtle weight underneath. Most people dismissed it, because that is what people do when something is not obvious. They wait for something bigger. Something undeniable. Something that forces them to look again. And then it happened. Not one moment, but a series of moments. Each one building on the last. Each one impossible to fully explain on its own. But together, they created a pattern. And patterns are what turn speculation into something that feels real. The first sign came quietly, a behind-the-scenes clip that was not meant to be analyzed. Liu Wu standing slightly apart. Zhao Lusi moving toward him. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would normally stand out. But the way they looked at each other changed everything. It was not scripted. Not performed. It was something else. Something that felt natural in a way that cannot be faked. People noticed. Not all at once, but gradually. As more clips surfaced. As more interactions were revisited. As more moments were placed side by side. And suddenly what once seemed random began to feel intentional. The conversations began. Soft at first. Careful. Almost hesitant. Because no one wanted to jump to conclusions. But curiosity has a way of growing. And once it starts, it does not stop easily. More evidence appeared. Not obvious. Not direct. But enough. Enough to raise questions. Enough to keep people watching. Enough to make everything feel connected. There were times when their proximity seemed coincidental. Until it happened again. And again. And again. There were moments when their expressions mirrored each other, not in a rehearsed way, but in a way that suggested familiarity, comfort, understanding. And those are not things that appear randomly. Those are things that develop over time. The intensity grew, not through confirmation, but through consistency. Because the more people looked, the more they found. And the more they found, the harder it became to ignore. The turning point came when everything aligned. A series of clips, photos, timelines, all pointing toward something that could no longer be dismissed as coincidence. It was not one piece of evidence. It was the accumulation of many. And that accumulation created something undeniable. Not proof in the traditional sense, but proof in the way it made people feel. Because sometimes the strongest evidence is not what is directly shown. It is what is implied, what is felt. What becomes clear when everything is seen together instead of separately. The reactions exploded, not because of shock alone, but because of realization. The kind that happens when something hidden becomes visible all at once. Fans revisited old moments, analyzed every interaction, looked for details they had missed, and found more than they expected, more than they were prepared for. Liu Wu remained composed. Unchanged in his public presence. But there was something different now. Not in what he said, but in how people saw him. Because once perception shifts, everything looks different. Zhao Lusi carried the same quiet strength, the same natural presence. But now every gesture felt more significant. Every moment more meaningful. Because context changes everything. And context had changed completely. The story did not end with exposure. It evolved. Because once something is revealed, it does not stop there. It grows. It develops. It creates new questions, new interpretations, new possibilities. And that is where this moment becomes something more than just a reveal. It becomes a turning point, a shift in how everything is understood. A moment where what was hidden becomes part of a narrative. Not confirmed, not denied, but present. And that presence changes everything. So, This is not just about evidence. It is about perception. About how quickly things can change when details come together. About how something can exist quietly until the moment it is finally seen. And now the only question that remains is this. When something real is revealed without ever being officially confirmed, does it make it less true? Or does it make it even more powerful because it exists beyond words? If this moment made you question everything you thought you understood, and you want to see what unfolds next, make sure you subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to see how hidden stories come to light, because the next part of this story might reveal even more than what we just uncovered. The moment people thought they had seen everything, the story shifted again, deeper, quieter, and far more intense than anything that had surfaced before. And if you stay with this until the very end, you're going to understand why what started as scattered moments between Liao Wu and Zhao Lusi was never just coincidence. It was something that had been unfolding slowly, deliberately, and almost invisibly until now. After the initial wave of reaction settled, something unexpected happened. Instead of fading, the attention grew stronger. Not louder, but sharper. People were no longer just reacting. They were observing, rewatching, connecting details that had once seemed unrelated. And that is when the second layer began to appear. Not in obvious moments, but in the quiet ones. The kind that do not demand attention, but reveal everything when you look closely enough. There were clips from earlier appearances. Moments that had passed without notice before. Now being examined with a different perspective. Liao Wu standing slightly closer than necessary. Zhao Lusi adjusting her position in a way that aligned with his. Not forced, not planned, just natural. Too natural. And that natural ease became the center of everything. Because comfort like that does not happen instantly.
It builds.
It develops.
It grows over time.
And once people saw it, they could not unsee it. The timeline became the next focus. When had these moments started? How often had they appeared? Were they isolated or consistent? And the more people looked, the clearer it became. This was not random. This was a pattern. A quiet, steady pattern that had existed beneath everything else. The realization changed the way every interaction was viewed. A simple conversation now felt layered. A shared smile carried meaning. A brief glance held weight. Because context had transformed everything. And context is what turns small details into something significant. But the most unexpected part came next. Not from what was shown, but from what was not. There were moments missing. Gaps in visibility. Times when neither of them were seen in ways people expected. And those gaps created even more curiosity. Because absence, when it aligns with everything else, becomes part of the story. It suggests that what is not seen may matter just as much as what is. The conversation shifted again. From what is visible, to what might be hidden. From what is known, to what is intentionally kept quiet. And that shift made everything more intense. Because mystery always pulls people in deeper than certainty. Liao Wu remained unchanged in his public presence.
Calm.
Focused. Unaffected on the surface. But now every action carried more meaning, not because he changed, but because people were seeing him differently. Zhao Lusi carried the same natural energy, the same effortless expressions. But now those expressions felt connected to something larger, something that could not be explained as easily as before. And that is what made this moment so powerful. Not confirmation, not denial, but the space in between. The space where everything exists without being defined. The final turning point came quietly, not through a major reveal, not through a dramatic statement, but through something far more subtle. A moment that would have been overlooked before, but now stood out clearly. They crossed paths again, briefly, naturally, without intention, or at least without visible intention. And in that brief moment, everything aligned. The way they looked at each other, the pause that lasted just a second longer, the unspoken understanding that seemed to pass between them. It was not dramatic. It was not exaggerated. But it was enough. Enough to confirm what people had been feeling all along. Not through words, but through presence. And presence is something that cannot be faked. The reactions that followed were not explosive. They were quiet, certain, because by then people were no longer searching for proof. They were recognizing something that had already revealed itself. The story did not end with exposure. It settled into something else. A quiet acknowledgement, a shared understanding, a realization that not everything needs to be said to be real. And that is where this story finds its ending. Not in confirmation, not in denial, but in something far more powerful: recognition. The kind that happens when everything finally makes sense without needing explanation. So now the only question that remains is this: when something real exists without ever being officially confirmed, does it make it less meaningful? Or does it make it even more powerful because it exists beyond words and beyond expectation? If this story made you see things differently and you want to stay ahead of what unfolds next, make sure you subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who understands that the most powerful stories are not always the ones that are spoken, they're the ones that are quietly revealed over time.